Let's see. All right. Well, we're just going to dive in. So again, this is a little bit different. I hang the, oh, that is a smart idea. Hide the dresser. Ah, yes, Elpida, shoot me an email and I'll just send you a link to where you can find it. If you're on my list. So the email I sent out today has a link to a YouTube video if you want to find it in there, or if you can't find it, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. Awesome. Okay, so before we dive in, actually, I probably should introduce myself. For those of you who I haven't met already in person or in a space like this, my name is Beth Porter. I'm an intuitive healer and life transformation guide. I work with a really powerful healing modality called emotional polarity technique, and really just to help people feel better about themselves and the world that we live in, and really operate from that place, which I believe ultimately helps lift this planet into higher frequencies and makes the world a better place. But that kind of work sometimes is really intense and heavy, and I don't want to shy away from the reality of transformation and the reality of healing and just make it look like sunshine and rainbows, because a lot of times it feels like fire instead. So I want to just kind of preface that. And as you know, tonight is about grief and guilt. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the tonalities of both of them, as well as, we'll have some journal prompts like last night, and then we'll do some shifting of the energy. So again, a little bit of a different framework. Before we go forward with all of that, I would just love to get us in a quick grounded space. So let me just adjust my situation here. Whoops. All right, I want to make sure that the chat is still available to me. Great. So I'm just going to walk us through a simple exercise just to get into our bodies and to get into the space here. So feel free to close your eyes and just settle into your seat. And just give yourself a sigh. Let your body relax into the space that you're in. Just let all the weight fall to the surface beneath you. Let gravity take over. And feel a sense of support from that surface beneath you. If your feet are connected to the ground, feel that connection. Your legs, your bottom, connected to whatever the seat is. Feel yourself just putting all your weight into that space. Then also notice how that space is rising up to also meet you. So kind of imagining this being sandwiched between these two energies from above your body and beneath your body, and perfectly fitting right there in the middle. Exactly where you need to be. And as you're noticing your breath, just notice it. Don't feel like you have to shift it or extend it unless that feels good to you. Just allow it to be. Having gratitude for it, for operating without your instruction all day. So it just naturally flows in and out without you consciously telling it what to do. And just having a little gratitude for yourself for carving out an hour this evening to connect to your grief, the collective grief, and any guilt, so that we can make some space. And just still with your eyes closed, notice the room around you. So take stock of the spaciousness that you feel. Notice the temperature. Any lingering scents in the air, if you lit a candle or just had dinner or saged. Notice if you hear any sounds in the background, whether in my end on my recording or in your home. And just let it all be there. And from there, you can just invite yourself back into the center of your body, kind of resting behind your heart space. And envision seeing out of your body from there. And what you see is a circle of this community. So all of us individuals in a circle around a blazing campfire. And just take a moment in this visualization to look to the right and look to the left and imagine just smiling or greeting the individual to each side, the soul that has decided to show up next to you. And just feel a sense of connection and community and gratitude and deep, deep compassion for each and every person, including yourself. And from there, when you're ready, you can blink your eyes open. I like to wiggle my toes and my fingers to kind of come back to this space. Just breathe as it feels good to you. If you need to release, just taking in a deep breath and breathing out your mouth, whatever feels good for you. Good. So, just know, feel free to pop in the chat or unmute at any moment to ask me questions or share something. This is very casual. But I will pop in, and start explaining about, grief. Grief and guilt. And like I said, this is a little bit of a different tonality than last night because anger is fiery and enacts action and, kind of is a higher, it's a higher frequency emotion. So tonight just might have a little more of a tenderness to it. So tuning into grief and just understanding some basics around grief. Again, let me just make sure my chat's all set up good. Okay. Grief really offers us this experience to go right into the river of our soul. That sounds like really intense, and I'm going to read a passage around it, but it's here to help us to honor loss or death or profound transitions in your life. It can be actual death of an individual, it can be death of ideas, death of relationships, attachments, death of dreams of the future. I think a lot of that is happening this year due to COVID and all of the world shifts. So it's really important to acknowledge and honor these transitional points that grief is here to help us process. Oftentimes our thinking mind doesn't really want us to be in the emotional body. It wants us to, I think part of the passage that I'll read says something around, the thinking or the logical or the intellectual mind wants to pull you out of the river too soon and dry you off quickly and make you all tidy. And grief really is here to allow, express, let flow the deep, deep sadness that is required to help you to move on. We're all here tonight because there's some connection to grief. There's, just whether you have experienced personal losses, which likely many of you have, including myself, but we are also experiencing collective grief that is just unresolved and it's just like building and building. And so by doing this work with yourself today, it's really beneficial for everyone. And I know I said this a little bit last night, but I really do believe in the value of this work for yourself rippling out to the rest of the world, and also being a model for other people so that they can have permission to grieve in ways that feel appropriate. What's wild and crazy about grief is that it can show up out of nowhere, and it really commands us to stop the forward motion and to be with. And it's not societally accepted to stop what you're doing and start grieving in most cases, especially if you're like in the middle of your day at your corporate job. Like it's, it's not acceptable. So we have to find ways to truly be with it and honor it in the spaces that we can allow. You can also need to grieve your past or things that like hanging on to the past. So for example, I experienced a few years ago this need to grieve my younger self, my 27-year-old self, who was wild and free and having a really fun time of my life, and having this space where the future seemed totally open and endless. And, years later, I got married. I moved across the country twice and settled into a new career. So shifting into this career path. And part of what kept me stuck and what kept me in this space, like I hadn't grieved this younger version of me. There's a part of me that like wished I had some of the things that she had. I didn't have the community here that I had back in Cincinnati, where I'm from, and things of that nature. I didn't have that sense of freedom and excitement and complete optimism about the future that I once carried. And it was really important for me to like, grief was knocking at my door, and I didn't know what it was at the time. So, now that I understand it, I'm like, oh, no shit. Okay. We needed to honor that. So it's also, I'm just giving that example to maybe open up some perspective of, where grief could be in your system, or what it could be attached to for you that isn't the obvious grief, things you grieve about. The other thing I wanted to remind you of and give you permission around is that you don't have to justify what you're grieving. You don't have to justify how intensely you're grieving or how lightly you're grieving. You don't have to justify not being able to conjure up tears in one scenario in front of people, but maybe when you're alone or watching a movie and it hits you, that's where it needs to come out. Like grief isn't going to show up when you want it to show up. It's going to happen, especially if you've been repressing it, or especially if it's something really, really big, like a death in your family, a death of a loved one, which many of us are experiencing all the time right now. So I just want to give you permission and space to know that and understand that. So I'll go ahead and read the message on grief, and then just check in and see how you're all feeling about that. Any questions, and we'll move into guilt and kind of how their relationship could be connected. Okay, so this passage I read, and I highlighted it and I wrote "holy moly" next to it because I was like, this is bonkers. Okay, so the message in grief. When I call grief the deep river of the soul, I mean the soul. I mean the fully resourced village that incorporates and integrates our bodies, all of our emotions, all of our multiple intelligences, and all of our dreams and visions. Grief is so powerful, I think, because it has the job of defending our bodies and our emotions against the cultural training that makes our intellects and visionary spirits so domineering. So, prioritizing our visions and our fiery selves and our smart selves versus our emotional bodies. So our visionary selves cannot connect fully to grief because they see no death and no loss. They soar into the future and above the world as it is. Therefore, they don't really mourn or grieve death. If we overemphasize our fiery vision aspects, we'll have a hard time connecting to grief, just as we will if we hide in our airy intellects. Our logical and linguistic intelligences usually try to circle around and dissipate grief. They like to talk about death and loss, find reasons for it, and make everything seem logical and tidy, which is the opposite movement to that which grief requires. Grief asks us to become quiet and stop all forward movement so that we may dive into the depths. But the intellect doesn't know how to go deep, not like the emotions can. The intellect tries to lift us out of the water and dry us off before we've really immersed ourselves in grief. So however that lands for you, that passage really hit home for me in explaining all these parts of ourselves that are useful. Our intellect and our visionary selves are obviously really useful. And when we're trying to maintain or find a centered, balanced being space to act and be from, we need all the parts, including the emotional body, which includes grief. So how's that landing for everyone? Just give me a thumbs up or a note in the chat. Cool. All right, any questions, feel free to pop in. Beautiful. Thank you for responding. So with that, I'm going to move into guilt a little bit. Guilt's a pretty quick thing to talk about here. I mean, both of these things I could talk about for probably 6 days each. But guilt, on the other hand, guilt is a really interesting emotional, it takes on a very interesting emotional vibration. So it's very connected to shame, guilt, shame, and humiliation. So, guilt is something that you've done or you believe that you've done wrong. Shame is something that you are, someone has taught you that you are not good because you are being this way. That didn't come out very well. We all know what shame is. And then, shame is usually coming from somebody else and then you adopt it. And then humiliation is like guilt, but it's, or it's like a mixture of guilt and shame where in some type of public scenario, you have been called out for whatever this thing is. So all of those three things really kind of wrap up together and they are super low vibe energies. And they actually, I think shame is actually like the lowest on the vibrational scale. And then guilt might be right above that. But, with that, they kind of act as anchors in our system. So yesterday when I talked about emotions and how they are energy, truly energy in motion, they're here to give us information and they're supposed to flow freely within our systems to help us maintain equilibrium and expand and grow and all those beautiful things. When shame, guilt, or humiliation show up, they weigh you down. They actually don't move very easily. And there's such painful experiences that, often you can be shamed for something and then shame yourself. You're like double shaming, triple shaming. I mean, it can really be a vicious cycle. So they're often very painful experiences. So we usually don't want to honor them or work with them. And so keeping that in mind, guilt tends to come forward when you've broken in an internal boundary. So yesterday we talked about anger being like our external boundary. The internal boundary is like when you've done something wrong or you believe that you've done something wrong. Someone's told you that you've done something wrong and the guilt shows up. And oftentimes we will carry the guilt as a way to punish ourselves for the thing that we did wrong versus releasing it and moving on with our lives. Like releasing it, adjusting our actions out, saying sorry, asking for forgiveness, things of that nature, and then moving on. We tend to hold on to it. And again, we hold on to it because it's a little bit harder to release, or it seems harder to release if you're not intentional around it. So, it just keeps you stuck. So usually, like when I'm in session and I notice that somebody has a pattern going on over and over, and I'll be like, okay, we should just test to see if shame or guilt, is involved here, because we will want to address that to allow that to move. I'm actually pretty sure we'll have space today to do the statements together that I've crafted. And in those statements, that has a lot of power in helping you to shift those vibrations. So I'm going to actually move us into the journaling piece if you're all feeling good. So let me know how you feel about the shame and guilt portion, just with like a quick thumbs up. Awesome. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to interrupt. So like last night, I'm going to just share, I'm going to share sound for us. Apparently, when I do this and post it on Facebook, it will not let me share the music because it's a copyright thing. But you'll get to experience some music today. And I'll just set the timer for, about 8 minutes. And you're welcome to just dig into this for you a little bit today. And I'll pop back on. Om Gam Ganapate Namah. 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 Om Gam Ganapate with the journaling, and you can always revisit or build later a little more. Go ahead and stop sharing. Beautiful. So while you have everything that you just brought to the surface in your mind, kind of here in this space, I think we're going to do some just, energy shifting or balancing, whatever we want to call it, from here. And then I would love to open it up for anyone to share if they would like to share anything that's coming forward. So first, just if you have, however you're seated is perfect. You can be lying down for this as well. Well, unless we have to do kidneys, but we'll see. Just uncross your legs. So if you have your ankles crossed or your legs crossed, just uncross your legs. Let kind of the flow of your body to be open. And let me just tune in here and see what we need to do. Okay, we're going to start with the liver like yesterday. So anger, resentment, frustration, depression. Okay, so you're going to put so if you were here last night or you were watching, this will be familiar, but you're going to put the palm of your hand over your liver, which is like bottom right rib space. And then you're going to, let me just double check that. Yeah, you're going to put the palm of your other hand over your forehead. So you'll just be looking like this, seated, however you like, however is comfortable. I'm going to mimic this with my magnets here. And I just want you to bring to mind the energy of, I said depression, right? Energy of depression. Yeah. And with that in your hands placed, go ahead and breathe. We're going to take in 3 deep breaths as a group. Just breathe in your nose and out your mouth. Good. Okay, let's see what else we have. We'll probably do like 5 or so emotions, depending on what needs to shift here for this whole group. So, okay. Yeah, quickly moving. Stomach, liver, stomach. No, kidney. Okay, left kidney. All right, left kidney we're going to work with. So if you are lying down, I'm going to have you work with your left kidney. So just like stick your hand behind your lower back. And let's see. Bad memory. Okay. Bad memory is the energy we're working with. And this can be that you have a bad memory about whatever, or it can also be, an actual bad memory. This memory that is shifting or moving, that needs to be shifted and moved, is not a positive experience for you. Let me just see what we need for the support. Okay, and we're gonna we're gonna do both palms. So palm, lower back on the left side, and palm over your forehead. And when you're there and bringing to mind, and you don't have to effort to bring to mind, just know that your system is already connecting to it, but just be conscious about the idea of bad memory and go ahead and breathe. Good. And if you're yawning or coughing or burping or crying, all of those are normal release methods, so don't be worried. Okay. We are in the stomach. Okay, stomach, disgust, low self-esteem, nervous, hopelessness. Hopelessness. All right, what's going to help that? Red. Okay, so now you're going to put, it's going to feel a little awkward, but the back of your hand over your belly button space and the back of your other hand over your forehead. So both backs. Back. Good. And bring to mind hopelessness. And go ahead and breathe. Releasing hopelessness. Good, 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 good. All right. That's all we have to do today. Yay. So that was just a quick group energy balance, tuning into what the whole crew needs here. So yeah, I would love to open the floor for anyone that would like to share a little bit about what came forward from journaling, or just what you're picking up, or what's standing out to you, or any questions, really, anything. So feel free to just unmute yourself and go. And I know if, never mind. I was gonna say, if nobody wants to share, I'll just ask somebody to share. Well, Vanessa, you put your camera on, so I'm curious if you're wanting to jump on.
Well, it's so interesting that I was literally kind of yawning so much. My eyes were watering. I had to kind of readjust myself because I really unexpectedly just was yawning kind of through all of those emotions.
Yeah.
But I was driving when I did the initial part. The journaling part was kind of more so funny, Beth. I think the last time I was also driving now.
You were. For the human design training, I was like, how are you taking this in? Well, you're incredible.
So, but it's just, I'm by myself in the car, so it's a good time for me to, sit with those thoughts and even those emotions. But I didn't really feel like what was coming up was impacting me, even though, the release was such a release,
Yeah.
As I was experiencing, I was a mom really, really young. And so as you were kind of sharing your experience, I was like, okay, well, maybe I also feel that grief, but maybe I don't, because maybe I don't, I've accepted it and kind of gone through that process of grieving it and all of that. But again, then the release part came and I was like, wow, like wiping, away.
Yeah.
So yeah, that came up for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing vulnerably, and it's really beautiful. And I think that's the thing with grief. I mean, it's a couple of things. It's something that you can have this release, and that is plenty, right? And, if it needs to be revisited and resurfaced, just trusting that it will show up. I mean, if you're living your life with intention, it will show up. You can meet it, hear it, listen to it, give it space. That's really all that it needs. And, obviously, this is just an assumption, so this is coming from my intellect, so take it or leave it, but my assumption is that we're all, like I said earlier, carrying a lot of collective grief that maybe we don't even understand, that we can't actually put a reason to or file it away in a tidy little space. As you know, we pick up so much from everyone around us, and the intensity here is no joke. So, but yeah, it's really beautiful that you could recognize that and say, give yourself a space and say, is this something that I really need to work through again, or is it not? Have I accepted it? And, have your own agency around it as well. Maybe it did need a little bit of space. Maybe that was for something else. Who knows? But you get to choose, kind of what the way forward is for you. The other thing with grief too, and I was going to suggest this for, the coming days, additional work. I always like to give like too many practices probably, but just giving your space to grieve. If you do already know that something needs to be observed from that space within you. And sometimes just acknowledging it is enough, kind of like what just happened with you, Vanessa, I think. But sometimes we do need a larger and multiple emotional releases. So just really inviting you to make a practice of seeing it show up and asking, again, it's like the message in it is to have us stop and pause and be with. Just, so you can really tend to it. And then again, like I said earlier, like that practice kind of helps us to model to other people that it's okay to themselves also take the moment. And just thinking about how, like, can you imagine a world that just like flowed in that way, where we were like, I'm, like crying at work and you're like, okay, I am grieving right now. I need to go and tend to this right now. It would be amazing. It would be amazing. Anyway, okay, I'll try to. Brandy, I would like to share after others go, but I have little ears and my mother nearby, so typing is better. Okay. Beautiful. Well, we'll have others share first, and then when you're ready, Brandy, you can pop on. Leah, yes, I definitely have guilt. I just don't know the connection to grief consciously yet, so it's good to hear. It may not be accessible yet. Yeah, so, and we're gonna, I think, maybe, well, I'll ask you, Brandy, in a moment about the sharing, but I do have some statements for us to walk through, and these can be helpful for when you don't know exactly. Again, I think our conscious minds want to like go and figure every single thing out. And in my practice, Leah, because we've worked together before, but we do connect to whatever the shit is that's under there that's connected to the current experience. And it's really awesome. And it kind of helps your logical mind get on board with shifting the patterns that are there. So it kind of operates from both the body and the mind. But for healing and shifting, I don't believe that we need to know exactly what everything is. I just think we need to like tuning into, okay, I'm feeling this guilt, and digging in a little deeper. What do you think it's around? And it might not be connected to the grief. It might just be guilt for, whatever I can go down to like 18 different routes of why you might have guilt. I know that, so to give you an example of a way grief has been connected to guilt for me before, was I moved apartments and I was grieving my old apartment, which was like basically, and Leah, you know this because you live here and you've seen my apartments, but it's like the same exact apartment as this apartment, but a different builder and different fixtures and features, and like the lights are a different size, and my shower head, this sounds so trivial, right? My shower head is different. I didn't like it. And I was grieving the old place. And I had to sit there, and I felt guilty about feeling so bad about this. This was like right at the beginning of COVID, when bigger things are happening to everyone else in the world. And I had to stop myself from like not allowing myself to grieve my old apartment, because it's a real experience for me and it's in my system. And if we were walking around with grief lodged in here and guilt on top of it, how are we supposed to operate as our higher, better selves for everybody else? So in order to be able to, hold space for healing for other people, it was really, just to show up as like a decent human in my life, I think it's really important for us to honor, acknowledge even those like little things. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, Leah. When we were doing the questions, I had no idea what I could be grieving. So I just went into meditation mode, and it happens to me, I fell asleep. Well, and it's like 2 a.m. for you, isn't it? But also quickly after, an image came up of a mother and two toddlers, not me or my mother. And how was she choosing one versus the other? So I guess that is maybe something I need to grieve. I'm the middle kid, and I think that I have trauma, so maybe I have to overcome that. And that could be totally possible, like having that imagery show up and mean something to you. And what I would do with that is to tune into what it felt like to be your middle kid self, what it felt like to be in that position, feeling like you are, being overlooked potentially, or whatever the tonality of that is for you. Oftentimes I allow with whatever heavy emotions that show up, I will kind of like meet myself, and I'll be like, all right, who needs help here? What like age, what child, the inner child work, like what age am I? What does she look like? And, kind of coming forward and seeing like a little Beth in front of me. So just imagining a little version of you in front of you, and taking her into your arms and just being with her, apologizing to her for her experience, telling her that it wasn't fair. Letting her know that she can be heard by you. And sometimes that looks like you actually processing. So you crying and allowing yourself to be heard by you. I hope that makes sense. But you can do an exercise like that to kind of tune into, what needs to be felt and honored there. Okay, let me know if that's helpful. Brandy, I can't seem to copy my notes in here. I'm ready to share aloud whenever you are ready. Okay. Brandy, would you be okay? How do you feel about doing statements and then popping on and sharing? Cool. Because last night I didn't really get to the statements, and I think when you sometimes are given homework to do alone, you're like, yeah, maybe I'll do that, but it's actually a really powerful exercise. So I at least would like for one of the workshops to have the space for it. We're just going to do 10 statements, so it'll be really simple and really quick. What I encourage you to do, if you can, is to say these statements out loud. So what I'm going to do is just I'm just going to walk you through them. Say a part of a statement, and you'll just repeat after me. I'll leave a little bit of space. And then at the end of each statement, we'll just take a deep breath in your nose and out your mouth, and you'll just release them. Okay, so we'll just dive into that. We'll do that quick, and then we'll get to more sharing. And I'll stay on for as long as people want to chat. Okay, so just settle in. You can start with a deep breath in your nose and out your mouth. Good. All right. I love and accept the part of me who is learning to grieve and breathe. I forgive myself for believing it is my responsibility to hold on to this guilt, that it somehow makes me a good person. And breathe. Without this pattern of unresolved grief and guilt, I open up space for a new experience of unconditional love. And breathe. I forgive the people in my life who taught me what I've known about grief and guilt that isn't true. And breathe. I ask others to forgive me for the times I've modeled what I learned about grief and guilt that wasn't true. And breathe. With this, I give myself permission to let it go and create new, healthy relationships with my grief and guilt. And breathe. I forgive myself for believing I am alone in this. And breathe. I love and accept myself letting go of needing this grief and guilt in my life to prove I am unworthy of unconditional love. And breathe. We're going to say that one more time. I love and accept myself letting go of needing this grief and guilt in my life to prove I am unworthy of unconditional love. And breathe. With this, I'm free to open up space for new expansive patterns of generating and sharing unconditional love. And so it is. Okay, thank you for doing that with me. There's some power in hearing your voice project new truths and new ideas and releasing. So, okay.